About a year ago, I made a video going over S-Blast and why, despite so many people believing in the potential of this weapon on its launch, it ended up not living up to the hype. But now, one more year has passed, and to my surprise, S-Blast has gone from a weapon that wasn't really worth playing to one of the 5 main Slayer weapons of the current meta. So the question is, what happened since my last video that allowed S-Blast to jump so high up the rankings? Today, that's what I want to talk about, going over the 3 main factors that allowed this to happen, being the buffs, meta shifts, and one more factor I'll get to later. And before we get started, I'd highly recommend you check out the original video, since this is basically a direct follow-up to that one, so I'll be elaborating off of my previous points from that. Anyway, let's start with the buffs. While S-Blast got some good buffs last time, its 2 most important buffs to its rise happened after that. The first one is increasing the blast radius from 1.8 to 2 units, or an increase of about 11%. S-Blast's long-range mode is incredibly inconsistent, and while this doesn't give it good AoE for hitting around corners by any means, it does make it a lot more consistent to try and hit opponents with a blast radius, helping a lot for potential burst combos or working off of other chip damage, since one hit can often combo with other higher damage sources. But that buff also paired very well with its second one, which was basically a direct end lag decrease of 5 frames, giving it a faster fire rate and, more importantly, faster time moving around with its squid form. This paired very well with the long range radius buff, since it now had both a larger radius and a bit better mobility, making it a lot harder to pin down. This also made its short range mode a lot more consistent. While that mode always had a powerful blast radius, it was very easy to punish before it could get its second shot off, and this change made it way more consistent at actually functioning. Side note, I like how Luna finally ended up getting its blast radius increased despite S-Blast having a larger one, and S-Blast getting faster despite Luna being faster. I was really worried that these 2 weapons archetypes would get in the way of each other, but they ended up still getting the qualities the other one had and being in a balanced spot while being different from each other. I would say these buffs mainly contributed to making the weapon a little bit less punishing. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely still one of the hardest skill floor weapons I think this game has, but the tools you have are just a little bit easier to work around, and that level of consistency really matters for something that's this difficult. However, that's not the last buff the weapon got, because Booyah Bomb also ended up getting buffs. While these are mostly small buffs, it got 3 of them at the same time. Being able to consistently break bubble, which is a special still pretty prominent in the meta, having a little bit larger of a blast radius for better displacement, and most importantly, being a little bit faster on startup, which was the main problem Booyah Bomb has. The game's gotten a lot faster since the old crab meta it thrived in, and it got broken a lot before it could actually be thrown. This change allows it to keep up more while still having it as an ample weakness. S-Blast wants to use it very fluidly, which helps a lot for S-Blast. Oftentimes you're popping this right after getting a kill and trying to continue a streak, or you've taken down most of the opponents and are trying to survive with HP while the rest of your team cleans the fight, and this allows that to happen more consistently, which gives the weapon higher potential for more playmaking power. But if these buffs were the only thing that happened, I don't think S-Blast would be as good as it is now. So it's time to talk about our next factor, meta shifts. Remember a bit earlier when I talked about how the long range mode would be more consistent when paired with other forms of chip damage, for instance? Yeah, we're in the most chip damage focused meta we've been in since the start of the game with crab meta. The main anchor is Pencil, which does a reliable 68 damage, which allows S-Blast or its Burst Bomb to combo off it. The main support in the game is Splash-O-Matic, which has Burst Bomb and Crab to work off of. Out of the other 4 main Slayer weapons you're often going to be paired with, 3 of them have a lot of tools to be able to work around for damage. Burst Bomb from Stamper, Splat Bomb from Slosher, 270 damage hitboxes, a 40 and 80 damage hitbox. There's just a ton more things to work around in the comps that you're more naturally building at higher levels. I mean, look at this Area Cup comp that S-Blast won with. It's literally a triple Burst Bomb comp. Clearly, you can spec into weapons that have the chip damage power to work with it. Before, that was a lot less likely. You needed stuff like Neo Splash to paint the floor. You dealt with a lot of Squeezer, which was very resilient to this weapon style of play. And you had competition from Range Blaster, which didn't have its blast radius nerf back then. While Range Blaster is still literally good enough to win tournaments right now, having its blast radius reduced does lower the gap between the two a little bit more. And even Sloshing Machine, which I wouldn't really consider competition anymore, technically didn't benefit as much from its Booyah Bomb buff because the fizzy paint nerf meant it didn't get as much of them. Maybe one day this weapon will also get some buffs. That meant that the meta shifts allowed you to build comps around what the weapon wanted to do, while also lowering the power of its competition. That being said, I definitely think there's a factor more of buffs making the main weapon more powerful than nerfs making it weaker, but both definitely played a factor. That being said, I mentioned one more thing, and it ties back to what I talked about in the previous video. I said that S-Blast was a high skill investment weapon, with potential for better playmaking power than something like Range Blaster could have, and that still holds true, if anything even more so. However, now that the weapon's been more worth it to use over the past year, we've seen more players investing into them. People who have taken months of time to dedicate to the weapon and build up their mechanical skill with it are having better opportunities to thrive now. And I think that's another factor worth pointing out. At the end of the day, the players have to bring out the potential of the toolkits weapons provide in this game. And so having the players capable of utilizing all of these buffs and meta shifts to their full extent was another big factor in what made it good. And that's really important right now. For a while now, Mint, Decapitator, and Splatana Stamper have had a bit of a dynamic. While the weapons have their own different reasons to be played, it's generally accepted that Mint has a much lower skill floor, but as a downside to that, has a slightly lower skill ceiling than Stamper, which, while harder to pick up, offers a little bit more reward. This has been a dynamic I've really appreciated. Stamper has been one of the fan-favorite competitive weapons to watch, and I think it's mostly because of that high playmaking power. But S-Blast and Range have long since been trying to have the same dynamic. While they do different things from each other that make both worth picking, S-Blast is the higher skill floor, higher skill ceiling version of the two. And now it finally gets to thrive, because the recent changes have made the skill floor a little bit more bearable and the skill ceiling a lot higher, which has made that investment finally worth it. And that's awesome. I think weapons like these that are really high investment are becoming more and more important in the competitive scene, and having a blaster work out so well for this, my favorite class, is something I really enjoy. S-Blast is still my favorite weapon in this game, even if it's not my strongest weapon anymore. And so I've really appreciated being able to see this weapon get the buffs and changes it needs to actually thrive. It's not something I personally expected to happen. So what have we learned? S-Blast has always had the archetype of a powerful weapon. Since day one, it was given a lot of qualities that had the potential to really thrive in this game. However, in order for that potential to be realized, you can't just have good qualities. You also need to have stats. At the end of the day, if enough factors are working against you, like a weaker kid or being too slow or having a meta that doesn't work for you, it's hard to take advantage of that potential. What S-Blast needed was the right buffs to the important areas to allow its potential to really shine, and that's what happened. And who knows, maybe it can happen for more similar weapons in the future. I'm looking at you, Dowser Doolies. This weapon also has some very similarly strong attributes, but we gotta let it paint the floor one day if it's ever gonna shine. Anyways, I'm just personally happy that the weapon ended up working out. Good job to the devs for well balancing this weapon, and let me know what you guys think of S-Blast's journey to the top in the comments below. I'll see you all next time.